as I was mentioning, we were talking about the frequency description of a sound, but there's another way to describe a sound. The envelope is the second way to describe a sound. Let's take the kick drum sound that we were just talking about. At some time you attack the kick drum, you get an attack, and you get some sort of a decay and a resonance, and it goes away. So this is the envelope of the sound in time. It has nothing to do with frequency yet. It's just what happens in time with volume. We're talking about a different description of a sound event. We're talking about a time-based description of a sound event. We were just talking about a frequency-based description of a sound event. But it's really cool how these two different descriptions interact with each other, because we're really talking about a sound. We're not talking about a description and how to describe it. This is just man-made concepts as to how to describe the sound. The real sound is what we're hearing. So we're always talking about ultimately what the sound sounds like. We're just trying to find ways of describing it and manipulating it that can be useful to us. Frequency domain description we just talked about with the Fourier transform, breaking apart a complex sound into fundamental sine waves. The envelope approach is a little different. There's a couple different features of an envelope. There's the attack, there's the decay, there's the sustain, and then there's the release. In all envelopes, you go up on an attack, and then it decays to a certain plateau. It sort of sustains there for a brief moment and releases. We break it apart just for descriptive purposes into 4 different parts. Okay, so the attack is the rise time of the sound. The decay is the time it takes to go to a sustained level. And then the sustained is a period at which it maintains a specific energy for a moment, and then it releases after that, which is the time it takes for the energy to die out of the sound. The interesting thing about this is this makes more sense when you think about a drum hit. But it's the same thing for an attack on a piano or a horn stab or whatever. It's the same principle, is that there's an envelope of the sound. Now, this is a way of describing sound in the time domain because it relates to time. We just described it in the frequency domain. Let's talk about how those two domains interact. Frequency domain and time domain are descriptions of the same sound event. 2 different descriptions. So it would be like you're at a museum and you're looking at a statue, and then you walk around to the other side of the statue, you see a different view. It's still the same statue. Just 2 different ways of describing the same event. So sometimes we'll talk about frequency descriptions, especially when we're talking about recording arts, because all of our equipment and all of our recording capture gear basically deals with frequencies, and we talk about frequencies. But in reality, you can think of it as a time domain description as well. When we adjust the frequency domain picture of a sound, we actually inadvertently adjust the time domain description of the sound. When we adjust the time domain picture of a sound or description of a sound by some manipulation, we also affect the frequencies that are in it. Now this is interesting. Let's stay on this example of our kick drum sound, right? Everyone knows what a kick drum is, right? You know, the floor bass drum. So let's stay with that example for a second. Let's say we hit it really softly. We don't apply a lot of energy to the drum. What do we get out of the drum? Well, we get an attack, but we don't get a lot of lower frequencies, low energy. It's a different sound than when you really whack it hard. Apply a lot of energy to the kick drum, and it resonates even more. And it changes the time domain picture. It also changes the frequency domain picture. So to make it even more complex, not just one sound with a complex amount of frequencies in it, but it gets even more complicated when you start thinking about the dynamics of a performance. So for you piano players, when you play soft, you know it sounds different than when you play hard. Same thing with acoustic guitar, acoustic instruments particularly. Electric instruments have a dynamic to them too, but it's a lot less dynamic than acoustic instruments. So a drum, you hit it soft, you hit it hard, it sounds different, way different. Brings to mind problems with drummers when they're inconsistent with how hard they're hitting the drum. The sound of the drum changes, and it really changes the feel of the song. So part of the process of recording is constantly trying to limit dynamics. When you limit dynamics, you start confining what frequency changes happen in a sound. But when I'm playing an acoustic guitar quietly, and then I play it loudly when I get to the chorus and start strumming harder, it's going to change harmonic content drastically, even though it's still the same acoustic guitar. There you go. It becomes really complex if you think of it in detail now that we understand a little bit about how sound is created and how it reacts. So instead of just making the blend sound really good in the verse where it's really quiet, everyone's playing non-dynamically, then they go to the chorus and everybody plays louder, all the frequencies in every sound change, or the balances of frequencies change. So every sound is dynamic, and the dynamics affect the spectrum. And we're going to talk about how sound is generated. So acoustic instruments, when you hit them harder or depart more energy into them, then they resonate more, like an acoustic guitar or like a drum. You hit it softer, there's not enough energy to make the shell vibrate and resonate a frequency. Hit it loudly, hit it hard, and all of a sudden you've got enough energy to make this thing vibrate and create the frequency that's character of whatever drum you're talking about, or acoustic guitar, or even horn, or flute. Play it quietly, you can't quite get a tone out of it until you play it hard enough and blow enough air to get a tone, and you play it really hard and you get a much harsher tone. So I was working, a little side story, I was working with a jazz sax player who played soprano sax, and man, I could not make his horn sound really nice. It was always so harsh sounding, and I tried everything. I tried fixing it with EQ, I tried all sorts of techniques, different microphones, having him stand back from the microphone, all sorts of stuff. And then the next day I had another guy come in who was a sax player, and he played a soprano sax, and it sounded great. It sounded really smooth and beautiful, and it was my same microphone, my same everything, and I'm thinking, wow, what's the difference? And he looked at me and goes, it's the player. It's how I'm playing it. A lot of it has to do with the musicianship and how people play versus all the technical stuff we can talk about as to how to record things. Keep that in mind, that the musician's always the most important. You get a great performance from a musician, it's really easy to make it sound good.